I know I'm late to the party, but can we talk about this why chainsaws were invented thing? I'm sure you've heard it. Chainsaws were invented in the 18th century to help women whose babies had got stuck in labour. Is that true? Well, yes, and also no. So the story, which is spelt out rather nicely here, is that in 1780, two Scottish surgeons, John Aitken and James Jeffrey, got together to invent this contraption here in order to remove the pelvic bone when women were really struggling to get the baby out in labour. And I can tell you right off the bat that that isn't true. The two surgeons weren't actually working together. They were both Scottish surgeons, and they both invented a type of saw round about the same time as each other, but they weren't working together. Now, John Aitken was in obstetrics and gynaecology, and he wanted a way to safely remove the pelvic bone, but not James Jeffrey. James Jeffrey was an anatomist, and what he wanted to do was find a way to remove diseased bones without having to amputate the entire limb. And if you look into the history of this, there's a proper bitch fight about who had the idea first. But what both men invented was not this, it was this. John Aitken called it a flexible saw. It has been called a chainsaw because it was based on the chains of a watch. Now what this saw did is you would take off one of the handles and there would be a very sharp needle there. You would then insert that behind a bone, put the handle back on and kind of use like a pulley motion to sever the bone from behind. I know that this is grim, but just go with me. John Aitken did use this flexible saw to try and help women who couldn't give birth to their babies, but it really wasn't a huge success. James Jeffrey, on the other hand, had a roaring success with it. It was a fantastic invention, a brilliant way to get rid of diseased bone without having to amputate an entire limb. Hurrah! But he wasn't using it to deliver babies. The contraption that you see here is a much later invention. This device was invented in 1830 by German orthopaedic surgeon Bernhard Hein. But he was in orthopaedics, he was all about bones, he wasn't about people trying to give birth. His invention was a definite upgrade on what had gone before because it featured a hand-cranked saw that was in permanent rotation. Well, permanent as long as you could keep cranking it. And this was supposed to be used to speed up amputations and operations. But it wasn't actually very good, it wasn't very quick, it wasn't very efficient, it just wasn't very successful overall. But the rotating saw, Bernhardt's invention, did go on to become the chainsaw that we know and love today. The first item patented as a chainsaw was this contraption in 1908, patented by Samuel Benz. It also featured the rotating blades, but it wasn't portable, it was massive. It wasn't until 1926 that the first electric chainsaw was patented by this guy here, Andreas Stihl. But this is not this. The 18th century saw featured serrated edges along an actual metal chain, but you still had to operate it by hand. And only one of the Scottish surgeons actually used it to deliver babies, badly. And this contraption, well, this wasn't used to deliver any babies at all. And that's how it's true, but not true, that the chainsaw was invented to help people give birth.